Sabrina Carpenter and Chappell Roan are both in the public discourse again, and though it may not initially look like it, what they're both doing right now is striking out, in a way, at the expectations that Hollywood, the recording industry, and show business as a whole have maintained for decades. Because despite how much they want you to believe the fact that Hollywood has grown with every other facet of society, when you really look deeply at show business and how it has always worked, there are a lot of figures and systems trying to keep it in the past, when celebrities were nothing but cogs in the machine, commodities to be bought and sold, all ultimately under the controlling thumb of the media bosses at production companies. And social media is the biggest threat that conventional media has ever encountered. In the past, if somebody wanted to be rich and famous, they had to go through a process of stripping themselves down to be the perfect cog to fit the needs of the system at that given time. The fame machine has always taken in humans and spat them out as commodities rife for the consumption. That's why Norma Jean becomes Marilyn Monroe and dyes her hair, why Margarita Carmen Cansino becomes Rita Hayworth and plucks her hairline. It's why a list of LGBTQ stars as long as my leg have participated in lavender marriages, letting fans think that they were straight and monogamous while often in the background they're anything but. And even among celebrities who weren't forced to change their literal name, often they were forced to separate themselves into the brand versus the self. This is very evident in celebrities like Taylor Swift. There has always been a big theme in her work that there is Taylor Swift, the brand, TM, the polished, perfected pop star who never has a hair out of line, and we only see her when she wants to be seen, versus Taylor Swift, the person who believes that her secrets are the most valuable thing and they need to be protected above all else. In exchange for money and fame, celebrities, especially female ones, are transformed into the role of a commodity, which is standardized, sanitized, and sold to fans, who often live vicariously through them or who develop parasocial attachment to them. Show business is about selling an illusion, something that isn't actually true. And show business often thinks very lowly of their audiences, believing that we cannot set aside traits of an actor and actress, and we will always put them on the character that they're playing. With the advent of social media, you did see an increase in the celebrities who maintained some level of their own authentic identity, but often the more they expressed their genuine personal identity, the more their film and TV offers dried up. And for every person who lived authentically as themselves, regardless of the impact it had to their career, there were many more waiting in the wings watching, seeing if the sacrifice was right for them, realizing that just because attitudes are better than they ever have been doesn't mean that they'll stay this good forever. Sabrina Carpenter and Chappell Roan and a number of other artists responsible for this Sapphic summer are signs of the widening cracks in the existing systems of Hollywood, because the audiences nowadays are maturing. They are capable of media literacy, even if they may not always possess it from the get-go. In this struggle over who is famous, who controls access to fame, and what fame means and looks like, artists are taking advantage of this wave and using it to surf to success. But are we at a crossroads culturally on fame as a whole? In a world where authenticity is a click away, is there even still room for Hollywood artifice? Hi, my name is Erin Moriarty, and in addition to doing Museless and Taylor Swift as her own muse interpretations of Taylor Swift's work, I also examine pop music, media culture, and influencer news from the perspective of somebody who went to school for electronic and media and film, and who has a special interest in old Hollywood, showbiz artifice, the sewing circle, Scotty Bowers, etc., with a specific interest in Sapphic artists throughout history and Sapphic influence on media and film. When gals are pals. In the words of Maggie Rogers, musicians are in the business of selling their own humanity as a product. This is paraphrased a bit, but it's such a great insight about the industry. Musicians are simultaneously selling authentic parts of themselves, but also trying to conceal the parts of themselves that might be off-putting to some listeners. For female artists, admitting your songs are about women risks alienating straight fans, especially those with homophobic proclivities, which is more people than you'd realize. Worse, if you're an artist who has a younger following, or who has a lot of followers who are in repressive religious groups, you might find yourself the target of an evangelical witch hunt if you even gaze too long upon another lady. Media teaches girls the gay looks a very specific way, and at the same time we are taught that so many feminine things are bad, like emotions and compassion and fashion and cooking and fiber arts. This cuts off a lot of us from not only fully embracing those things in ourselves, but also not being able to appreciate them in other women. Because of this, I would say a significant percentage of women have at least a little attraction to other women. They just either get taught to ignore that feeling at such a young age that they become experts at denying their own feelings, or they falsely loosely equate their feelings as just normal friendship among girls. The patriarchy benefits from keeping women in the dark to their sapphic yearnings, so they will just assume that they are straight, like all the normal girls. They go off and date men, and because of this, you get wild assertions from straight girlies like, what? Don't all girls go down on our best friends? If you want to kiss a woman, if you want to play with their boobies, if you want to play house with a woman for the rest of your life or go down on a woman, that is not heterosexual, that is not friendship, that is sapphic. The patriarchy has a vested interest in keeping as many women married to men as humanly possible, and it does not care whether the woman is happy or fulfilled in that partnership. This, coupled with a dating culture that forces women to minimize everything that they are and often become surrogate caregivers to the men they end up pursuing romantically, often puts women in a position where their needs don't wholly get filled by the men they commit to. These needs get instead filled by surrogate people outside of the marriage, her guy best friend, her work husband, her gay guy friend. In an attempt at keeping their monogamous relationships intact, they then find ways to make the intimacy they're receiving from other people feel less like cheating. There's a gray area that is created out of necessity, and in this gray area, a considerable amount of sapphic activity occurs. In rich women especially, it is very common for her to play house with her husband and fulfill whatever needs he places on her, and then to turn around and get real love and intimacy from other people on the side. This is why so many royals had mistresses and men on the side. People that are rich often find it a financial fallacy to mix one's extended financial futures and the raising of heirs with love and romance and sex and things that are seen as volatile. Also, what some straight women would term as more than best friendship, and that one friend who gets you better than your husband, would probably be more accurately called by Sapphics a sapphic friendship. Basically, because heterosexual feelings and relationships are the only ones normalized, we often have romantic and sexual feelings for someone of the same gender that we force ourselves to process in a platonic context because we're not ready to see ourselves as queer yet. But if your same-sex bestie is in a happy and healthy relationship with a man and you're disappointed, that might not be a best friend after all. If you look into your future and you see yourself as a widow with no man who is chilling with your gal pals, you may not actually want to marry that man in the first place. I think this is also because we see lesbian and bisexual as looking and acting and being defined very specific ways when there's a wide breadth of different experiences. Not every sapphic is super masculine. A good number of us go hyper feminine, and I think this is where people like Peach PRC and Sabrina Carpenter can confuse the straights. Such rigid ideas of what queer women are supposed to look like prevents a lot of people from sitting with themselves and thinking about how they actually feel. And often this discomfort they feel at not having resolved their identity results in them going out and dating a lot of men and having unsuccessful relationships and not knowing why. If you don't even know who your authentic self is, you can't even present that authentic self when you're dating, and you're always going to seem to potential romantic partners as though you're putting on an act because you don't know who you are in that moment, and all you are is defense mechanisms and coping strategies and generally people pleasing. And the type of partners who glom onto that type of personality type are often very harmful ones too. Especially when an artist uses men in their art in a way that suggests they're disposable or easily replaceable. As someone who dated a lot of men because of denial and concealment of my identity, it is a glaring red flag that tells me she might be fruity. There's also the matter of women who don't experience attraction at all and the way they are often forced to prostrate themselves as hypersexual pleasure kittens or the inexperienced ingenue waiting for the touch of the right man to come along. Because those are the two roles straight women can choose to be cast in. But in the end, that is one thing that must remain true. She must at least seem open to male attention. There's also the bigger issue wherein, as queerness evolves, it becomes less about realizing you're one thing or another and never evolving, and more about a constant state of fluidity. As someone who is now in my 40s, when I look back at my past, there were times when I interpreted my feelings towards men as attraction and a desire for relationships that I later looked at more critically and realized it was a combination of gender envy and wishing that men would treat me and respect me the way they respect other men. Unfortunately, especially in the media, coming out is seen as a finality, and straight people are reticent to look at you other ways. I've come out 3 times in my life, first as bi, then non-binary, then as a lesbian. While I see that as a continuing identity journey that I might be on my entire life, I do realize other people in my life treat me as though I'm confused in a demeaning fashion. There is a huge gap between many queer people's perceptions and thoughts of gender and cishet people's, and it is a gap that cannot easily be jumped. It's just another complicated complication that can make any queer person, but especially those with large fandoms and pre-established images, to want to just publicly present as straight. Until celebrities can come out of the closet and have zero impact to their career, we are going to have a ton of closeted celebrities. And that is by design. They don't want us to realize how many queer people are making our media and how much media is made by us, you know? I often think back to 1997 when the character of Ellen came out on Ellen's sitcom. Not only did it ruin Ellen DeGeneres' career opportunities at the time, but also the straight actress who played her love interest for one episode was out of work for like 2 years afterwards. This is Laura Dern 4 years post Jurassic Park, and she can't get a gig because she played a lesbian for an episode. After she herself came out, Ellen's roles changed a lot. She basically had to desexualize herself entirely and make herself very child-friendly to continue to have a career in women's and children's media. Regardless of what viewers want or are able to accept, Hollywood honchos often won't cast a woman in a desirable role unless they're someone they personally find desirable. And even if the role isn't meant in any way to be desirable, it's as though a lot of higher-ups have the belief that if a woman isn't there to be an object of men's interests, she shouldn't be there at all. The Disney of it all. And that's before you factor the Disney of it all. Disney and Nickelodeon and similar corporations that manufacture child stars have a pretty poor track record when it comes to LGBTQ kids. Not that they have a particularly good track record for any kids, but it's particularly hard on the ones that are a little gay. Nickelodeon stopped inviting JoJo Siwa to award shows when she came out. Raven-Symoné has spoken out about handlers and stylists pressuring her to look like less of a lesbian, and Hayley Kiyoko was told that Girls Like Girls was too violent and too sexual. All the artists that we know of who have grown up as child stars and then left the closet have spoken out about how much pressure there was to stay in the closet. So we have to assume that especially among artists who have achieved famous children, that there's an immense amount of pressure to stay closeted and a significant number of closeted stars. I've been keeping my eyes peeled for everything that is part of this Sapphic summer, and it is so inspiring to see so many women killing it. It would be remiss of me not to mention Sapphic success stories like Megan Thee Stallion, Renee Rapp, Maggie Rogers, Miley, Fletcher, so many more. It's becoming so obvious just how much of an impact Saphics and LGBTQ people as a whole have on music and media. There is a significant precedent for a huge percentage of our media being made by LGBTQ people, and this belief we have that we are a minority in Hollywood forces many to face the hard decision of coming out and limiting their career and earnings potential versus staying in the closet and presumably being in bearding or lavender relationships. A lot of us get afraid of everything we have to sacrifice, and many of us get told that love is not worth as much as the money is. Celebrities exist in the context of what is normal for celebrities, and lavender marriages, PR relationships, acting like you're monogamous when you're poly or open or ace, all of that is normal contexts for celebrities. Not just Hollywood, real life too. I downplayed my attraction to women and pursued almost exclusively men for many years because I knew that it would be harmful for my career if I were to come out of the closet. And I know that there are still a lot of us hiding out there, because as soon as I started talking out about my experience and how long I had hid and why I had hid, I started getting more and more private messages from people who had done the same thing, who were still in the process of doing the same thing. When you have to make a decision between safety and financial security versus pursuing somebody that you actually love and are attracted to, very often under capitalism, we choose the first because we may not have the option of the second, or we may perceive the option of the second as too undesirable to be worth it. PR and PR relationships. Whenever I mention a celebrity's name in the word PR, inevitably I have a bunch of their stans in my comment that are like, oh my god, they don't need PR, they're too big for PR, they're too famous for PR, everybody knows who they are already. And that's exactly what their PR team would have you believe. They want you to believe that celebrity success is organic and the natural result of what fans want. I've heard some people say PR is dead, but I would honestly wager it's more alive than ever, because now all manner of figures use it. Major YouTubers, companies, reality stars, so many of these figures either have a dedicated PR person, or they're using strategies from observing other people's PR in action. In an era where any random fan or hater's opinion of you can go mega viral in an instant, it is critical to have some way of managing public sentiment. Celebs don't want you to see how PR teams craft the narratives that gain them the roles and the acclaim and the awards they're after. The biggest celebrities are big because of PR and because of their talent. You need to have both. And failing to accept that PR is a real thing that happens means that the celebrities who are particularly good at it are not noticed for those efforts. It's a skill that some people like Taylor Swift have really perfected into an art, and I think we should respect that and should notice that. I also think it's important to remember that when a celebrity is big, tabloids want to use their name as often as possible so that they can get clicks and physical media sales. Especially with large figures like Taylor Swift, these media outlets are looking to run a headline about her every week, if not every day. Often an element of PR is giving these outlets something positive or neutral or not all that bad to talk about so they don't start diving into deep problematic parts of that celebrity's past or their actual private life digging for crumbs to sell. PR is a skill. Recognizing the quality and effectiveness of an artist's PR strategy is not a criticism. In fact, it's praising their business sense and the ability to keep our attention. When Chappell Roan said she was your artist's favorite artist, that is a planned part of the Chappell Roan project and establishing the identity of that project. She knew it was a way to instantly get a reaction out of many people out there who were fans of Drag Race in referencing Sasha Colby. But the LGBTQ community is big on authenticity. If we thought Chappell was a poser, for lack of better words, it could have really backfired in the worst way. And it happened right at the period of time where her fame was really exploding, and I wager that she had had large artists reach out to her behind the scenes. When she said that, she knew that not only did our faves truly like her, but also that she truly respected the artist whose material she was homaging. It was important nuance, the continuing thread of queer culture under the current of the dominant cis-heteronormative main culture, a musician paying homage to a queen who genuinely inspired her, and in doing so refreshing Sasha Colby with an influx of new attention. Chappell made it very clear after she said it who she was quoting and why. She gets on that stage every night, does the work authentically, cites the people who inspire her, and that resounds with an audience that is sick of PR that is artifice. Recognizing what is likely to be PR is an important part of media literacy, and it's important to remember that the media doesn't want you to have media literacy. They want you to just feed the stories that they're telling you unquestionably. It's obvious that they're going to try and dismiss people whose eyes are too open. And I think it's interesting right now. We are in a moment where audiences are becoming more aware of PR and when something is being done or enhanced for PR purposes. But we're also in a moment where more and more people are recognizing the skill it takes to weave a PR narrative. And so long as it's either a good story or a story that feels authentic to you as a performer, people are kind of okay with it. I follow a lot of PR and media literacy accounts on TikTok, and I like seeing the way people are informing themselves about these tactics and being mindful about the fact what we see may not always be the truth. And look, some people will always be offended by the idea that a celebrity has lied to them to curry favor and influence for the benefit of their art and career. But more and more people are aware how the machine works and how PR plays into it, and at least respect the hustle. Plus, people just love tea. They love stuff that's messy. They love speculating, and the more murky the details are, the more they like to speculate. This is incredibly valuable and a skill Taylor Swift has harnessed better than almost anyone. Every minute we spend listening to TTPD trying to determine who each song is about is a minute we're not listening to all the great new albums that are coming out this year. Chappell understands just how valuable the intangible skill of being a performer is, and she can tie that into moments that are designed to go viral and leverage the strength of social media PR. It's just another skill she has that a lot of other artists don't have because they're not playing into their authentic selves. As I say in nearly every video, we are in an attention economy. It's not nearly enough to sell albums and tickets. We need to be streaming, engaging with fandom, keeping track of what our fave is doing even when they're not actively releasing or touring anything. This is where PR comes in, and one of the most effective forms of PR out there is relationship PR. We love to speculate about other people's relationships, and celebrities and their teams bargain on that fact. They don't have to put details in their songs. They can publicly say they falsified details so you wouldn't know what the song was about. But the more people who speculate, the more people who listen to the song over and over and over again. Now, there's very often the impression that PR relationships and real relationships are two separate but disparate things, and that's very seldom the case, I think. Relationships can start as PR and then become for real because the celebs recognize that their on-screen chemistry existed off-screen as well. Alternatively, you can have one partner that gets more attached than the other and takes it as real. Best example I can think of in that is Jake and Tana. That was for clicks and views for him, and it seemed very real for her. Celebrity relationships that start real and become serious often gain a PR element as they go. And that PR may be handled via one joint PR team, especially if they get married, but very often celebs still have two separate teams that are pushing different stories, especially if a marriage is falling apart. And for example, if Ben Affleck's team knows he's looking to bounce, but he doesn't want to look completely evil, he might heavily pressure his wife J-Lo to do a documentary of that love story movie she's making, and then act like the totally browbeaten victim of her crazy love quest so that no one will fault him for leaving. And in many instances, the PR aspect of a relationship is just the exclusivity. Even in more liberal circles, there is still a lot of bias against non-monogamy. But the less you're reliant on your significant other for financial support, the more people realize that their needs aren't met with one person. Add to that the number of celebrities who travel for work, or who aren't based in the same state, or who just like participating in the age-old tradition of swinging, especially when you're younger and you're attractive and you're part of a party scene and you might be imbibing or insufflating. And even when no official PR relationship plan is in place, especially with younger stars, relationships can be engineered simply via who they're allowed to spend time with. Especially for child stars and others who enter the industry very young, your agent and management teams can have a lot of control over your schedule. If they want to try and engineer a romance with another young star, they just schedule you a lot of time with them and no one else. You very often have PR among friends, too. That's why we know that Gigi Hadid bought Taylor Swift a ring. Like, there are ways that could have been purchased quietly so we never found out about it. And finally, not all beef between celebrities is real either. Sometimes you've got a famous good guy and he's trying to prove that he's ready to take a bad boy role. So maybe he goes on a few dates with an up-and-comer that he ghosts, something that's enough to get people to look at him a little differently, but not so much that if he fails, he can't quickly re-earn his good boy reputation, often at the expense of the starlet involved being labeled easy. Especially with how the Kardashians have kept their names in the headlines with minor controversy after minor controversy, it seems increasingly common for celebs to agree to beef publicly just for PR. Speculation. I want to pivot a moment to discuss speculation because it always becomes a sticky wicket in these discussions. Very often, I see bigoted individuals misinterpret and misrepresent the good faith recognition of others we are in community with to further their own agendas. It is always okay to speculate someone is hetero, and until the same is true for LGBTQ, there is always going to be this dichotomy, both in Hollywood and in real life. Now, whenever this discussion comes up, people who are outed against their will always protest, and to that I have to say, this really is not at all the same situation. First off, you can only out somebody if you have personal knowledge about their orientation. Like, if you guys hooked up, speculating that somebody is LGBTQ because of their clothes, hair, jewelry, symbolism, etc., that's flagging, which is and should always remain an important part of our culture and identity. Pointedly, flagging is something that is done voluntarily for the purpose of being seen by other people like you, while at the same time avoiding the harmful eye of the cis-heteronormative majority. Because it is done voluntarily and on purpose, noticing it cannot be intrusive. It's like noticing someone is in a serious relationship because they're wearing a ring on that finger. If they didn't want people to think they were taken, they'd remove the ring. Flagging also tends to defy fashion norms in a way that's hard to do unintentionally by people that aren't also queer. Queer flagging is the accepted way to quietly express yourself as queer to others in the community, and just because not every one of us recognizes the signs doesn't mean that these signs are invalid or the people using them don't have those identities. It just means that a considerable part of sustaining the dominant heteronormative culture is keeping marginalized people separated from knowledge and community. It makes it harder for questioning individuals to establish the community they need to firmly establish their identity. Queer does not equal sex. And a lot of the debate over whether speculation is appropriate also just stems from only seeing queerness as being sexual, when in reality, it's about so much more than that. First and foremost, in a Sapphic sense, it is about seeing women for all that they are, not diminishing their power and accomplishments and beauty by forcing childlike ideals on grown women, and by ignoring all of the societal forces women have to fight against on a daily basis. It's about seeing people as people, not cogs in a system, valued by how much profit they bring into said system. It is about questioning why things are the way they are and defying norms that do not make sense. Because when you question things that have been programmed into you, like the idea that you must marry someone of the opposite gender, you start to see just how many other things that you used to believe were set in stone are actually malleable. It is fashion and music and found family and television and art, and when we don't have reciprocity between those who are queer flagging and those who are reading queer symbols, the subculture of queer art that runs underneath the dominant cis-heteronormative main culture begins to weaken. I think queer platonic friendships are also somewhat of a confusing beast for straight people to understand. I think of the friendship between boy genius members where it is normal for them to kiss and hug and proclaim their love for each other. It is not uncommon among queer people to prioritize their friendships more than their sexual relationships. Queer people very often recognize that friendship and romance and sexuality are things that you can get from one partner, yes, but they're also needs that can be filled by multiple people in the greater community around you. Queerness often makes you see everything from a different lens. It makes you cast aside societal structures that exist only to contain and limit us and that don't apply to our needs and wants as a person individually. These aren't queer artists. You can't discuss them in a queer context, people say about artists who will eventually come out of the closet. Frankly, we should not have to wait for queer artists either to come out to straight people's standards or to pass away and have their letters and diaries leaked to analyze them from a queer lens. It is not offensive if somebody thinks that you're queer. And if you think that's offensive, I really would invite you to address that bigotry. Like, even if you are a member of our community, you can be part of the community and still possess a lot of the internalized biases and preconceived notions that were like beat into you by the media system. And until you look at the things you believe and why you believe them and address like these biases that are inherent in your thoughts, you are going to continue to possess biases even for the communities that you're a part of. It is very common for LGBTQ people to possess internalized homophobia. It is very common for women to possess internalized misogyny. Unless we actively work to disassemble these notions, they're going to be inherent in us. Hetero fans can constantly speculate who is dating, whether or not they're doing it, how they're doing it, can guess at the engagement date and the ring, and can put baby pictures of everybody involved into an AI baby generator. Will they then speculate what the sprog will be named? Will they get him snipped, then immediately begin speculating which of his parents' friends' children he's been destined to marry because they've been friends since the cradle, tee-hee! But the moment we just speculate that somebody's not straight, we're the worst trash and we need to be damned to the bottom of the deepest trash heap ever? That makes sense. Are there queer fans that take the speculation too far? Absolutely, but fans of every belief, stand, and bias have extremist members, and if you are solely focused on the extremist beliefs of a few queer fans, you are just using your own self-righteous indignation imparted by your own perceived fandom rank to gay bash, and maybe you should look into why you feel that way, because we make your media. All that to say, queerness is so common, and as such, it shouldn't be newsworthy on a grander scale for someone to be LGBTQ. I get very uncomfortable when mainstream news outlets cultivate information that they gather from the social media profiles of marginalized fans and use it to make a sensational story of, oh my god, this celebrity you thought was straight is actually not. Recognizing and accepting queer identity and queer community is something we should do amongst ourselves. It isn't and shouldn't be for the purpose of mass media outlets getting clicks at the expense of our well-being. It always has the aura of outing us as liars or deceivers instead of embracing us for who we are. It always acts as though the person coming out is an outlier and there aren't dozens more of us waiting in the wings, putting on a straight act until the perfectly calculated moment where we can finally embrace our true selves. It also draws out every religious zealot who's been taught church-ordained hatred, and since they often can't harass the celebrity directly, they attack the fans whose research was used in these articles. It's like they believe if they wound us grievously enough, their fave will turn straight again. And it's not fair to either the artists in hiding or to their fans, because often when you're hiding, there is still a desperation, and your queer fans shouldn't have to wait until hetero people are convinced you're fully out to embrace your art through that lens and embrace you into that community. We want to be seen by each other. That doesn't necessarily mean we want to come out to the point where we will suffer the systematic violence of bigoted media talking heads who will leverage our identities in a grift for their brainwashed followers' money. And it's even more unfair for homophobic fans to spend so much of their time framing those who speculate gay stuff as being lower than the worst scum on earth, only to spend most of their time on the internet bullying others and speculating straight stuff. And I need to take a moment to discuss speculation versus the truth. I think one of the biggest issues we have in fandoms are people who, regardless of what they believe, think their theory is the absolute biblical truth and that they know every detail and every fact of that celebrity's relationship or life. Then, when they encounter other opinions, they short-circuit so hard they feel compelled to troll in the comments. As I've said before, when celebrities are capable of meeting up with their alleged paramour for a photo shoot with Backgrid, then hop on a private jet and aren't seen for a week, they could be hiding an entire second private life that the public is completely unawares of. Celebrities are wealthier than we are, and the culture around them does not promote monogamy. It promotes hiding all of your alleged sins behind a veneer of monogamy. The Pinkett Smiths aren't the only celebs with an open marriage. They're just one of the few families willing to tempt the scorn and be open about it. There is some belief that the PR relationships discussed in books like Elizabeth Taylor's autobiography are a thing of the past in progressive Hollywood. Personally, if I'd have to guess, I'd say PR relationships seem to be increasing in frequency, as they're very often a way for celebrities to get their name in the headlines, often with one of their co-stars or professional collaborators. They are frankly the best way for a celebrity to get their name back in the headlines after a scandal, and any relationship that crops up in the immediate aftermath of a scandal is always suspect to me. And no, I don't think it's invasive or inappropriate to speculate about which relationships are PR or not, because these relationships are so often the framework for a product being sold to us. That product just might be listening to a song or watching a film, but this is an attention economy, and it's not enough to just have our money. They want our time and our attention as well. I think it is informed media viewership and media literacy to be skeptical whenever two people are in a relationship for exactly 3 months, or exactly 12 months, or exactly 13 months, or if they start dating at a particularly career advantageous time only to break up very soon after that moment has passed. If a celebrity is suddenly booed up with a member of the opposite gender the day after they were photographed too close to their same gender bestie / personal assistant, it's suspicious to me. If a male celebrity has a controversy, especially one that involves cheating on his pregnant ex or abandoning their child only to show up next week on the arm of some hyper-feminine younger woman, it's suspicious to me. There are so many talented actors, actresses, singers, performers out there nowadays. You need to be good at marketing yourself, and the way you market yourself is through PR. Something I've said about TTBD is that the biggest bait and switch Taylor Swift ever played on you was convincing you that album was about any man she dated. Sure, there were little Easter egg references to various men to get people invested in actually reading the lyrics, but once you read the lyrics, it's a haunting tale of how rich Hollywood men took advantage of the naive dream that she had to be the world's biggest pop star, and that she did get her dream, but at what cost? The cost of her authentic self and the true love that she could have only found by living authentically of that self. And not to mention all of the mental health crises she's probably dealt with because she's been concealing her true self and promoting brand Taylor and putting on that face for so long. Taylor has seemingly found out that people only really look when they're hoping to find dirt on one of her exes. Were she to sell the recent work as what it really is, examinations on the facet of herself that make up Taylor the whole, critics would dismiss it as pompous and narcissistic and spoiled little rich girl syndrome. As a whole, women's art is often dismissed unless it centers men, which is why so many Sapphics use male muses in their songs or go with the almighty second-person you. That's why so many female artists make songs where they posit themselves as the man in the equation. All at the same time, you are also having Sabrina being labeled the most heterosexual one alive, and then very soon after releasing a video that says she's anything but. It's not surprising to me that so many hetero fans are desperately trying to shove their hyperfemme princess back into the box, though. It's just acting, they say. That's so funny, because all of those interviews Sabrina's been doing recently, she just keeps reminding us what a good actor Barry is. Wonder why that is. But it's Sabrina's song, it's Sabrina's video, and what she chose to do was make the woman, a woman who's been noted in the past for bearing a resemblance to Olivia Rodrigo, fight over a man who was so disposable as to remain nameless as a character, only to have the women kiss in the end and not really care when the guy's unalived. Okay. And my personal interpretation of this video is that Jenna is trying to convince herself that she is happy with this nameless boyfriend, but whenever she is spending time with him, she thinks of Sabrina. I'm not the only lesbian who saw this video and immediately saw Sabrina as a personification of sorts of Jenna's Sapphic fantasies. As someone who desperately tried to tell themselves I was bi and that I could be happy with a man, but every time I tried to pretend that I was happy and domestic, I'd think of a woman and said, it spoke very loudly to me. Jenna accidentally unalives the boyfriend during one of these visions, but she doesn't seem to mind that much. She just goes kissy kissy with Sabrina. This is not straight behavior. She could have hired literally any actor, actress. She could have done literally anything that she wanted for this video. She seems to have a decent amount of creative control. This is what she chose to do. This is not straight behavior. This is a queer woman taking steps to begin to change the opinions of those who call her the most heterosexual woman around. And she shouldn't have to be a Billie Eilish and proclaim how much she loves shoving her face in a vag for her to be counted with the team. As an aside, I've always suspected the Olivia Rodrigo-Sabrina Carpenter feud over, what's his name? It just felt so manufactured. And I have always wondered if they weren't using a man as an excuse for why they hated each other to cover for a volatile breakup or something. Sabrina Carpenter could have hired any actress she wanted for this project. It's so interesting to me that she chose the one that bears a strong resemblance to the woman that she was in an alleged love triangle with. It's It's so funny to me that I can't remember the name of this guy that was in that triangle, but I can certainly remember Olivia and Sabrina's name. And the boyfriend was nameless in the video, too. Must be nothing. I would not be surprised if they both dated the same guy at the same time, because they actually wanted to date each other and eventually did end up dating each other, because it wouldn't exactly be unexpected behavior from Sapphic women, I'm just saying. As for the line about forgetting her gay awakening, I take that to mean either she's bi or a later realized Sapphic, and that she had expected some big moment where she realized that she was gay or bi or whatever, when in reality, what a lot of us have is a friendship that we slowly realize, oh, this has actually been more than a friendship for like a while. And I have personally used the line, "God forgot my gay awakening," so many times to describe my experience as somebody who kind of figured out myself later on in life. So I definitely did not take that as her saying that she was not at all into girls, the way some people took it. And that line also adds a bit of plausible deniability. Celebs tend to lose some fans when they come out, but there are usually some fans they can retain so long as those fans see it coming. Many artists and performers go through a process of slowly adjusting their fans to the fact that they're LGBTQ to try and minimize the impact. They can also backtrack somewhat, like in the case of Billie Eilish, where it seems like she made a knee-jerk PR reaction because she was scared of the threat to her career when Vanity Fair announced, oh, hey, Billie is coming out of the closet, or whatever that article was. I don't care to look. But she has since stated that she regrets making that statement, and I don't hold it against her because so many of us do that. There have been a number of things recently where someone has confessed something and then almost immediately recanted it. And just because someone recants a confession doesn't necessarily mean it's not true. A lot of times people aren't quite emotionally ready when they initially start speaking their truth, and if they get pushback, it's easier to recant back into the lie that has kept you safe for years than it is to step confidently into the truth and into that discomfort. On Chappell Roan. I think the Chappell situation is in a lot of ways related to a lot of things I discussed about Sabrina and Taylor. Chappell has a very big dividing boundary between her real-life self and the Chappell project, and I think it's very interesting how often she acknowledges that Chappell Roan is a project and is using this language that I think a lot of people who are younger can relate to in like a drag persona to separate herself and distance herself from Chappell the project. While Taylor has been pointing out both versions of herself in her art for basically her whole career, she's never really gone so far as to give it its own separate name outside of those of us who called it Brand Taylor or Taylor TM versus Taylor herself or Taylor the person. And I still don't know how many fans make that distinction, because every time I mention it in a video, I get people who are confused by it and don't know what I'm talking about. I think a lot of people are being confronted by the fact that they genuinely don't know much about Chappell's real life, relationships, or feelings, or things like that, and it is making them think a lot about their feelings with other artists like Taylor, who they have developed this feeling where they do believe that they know everything going on in her life. And so they're trying to connect with the artist behind Chappell, figure out who she is, every detail, the way they think they know what's going on in Taylor's life, but like, they don't, which is something that Taylor has increasingly been pointing to in her art recently. Haters of Chappell keep using Taylor as an example of why Chappell needs to give more of herself. They reference this video where Taylor's about 18 and she's promising about all of herself to her fans, essentially, saying if people follow her everywhere and want autographs and never give her a moment's peace, that is just the cost of her dream, but they're not looking at that video critically at all. Personally, when I see it as a sad reminder that those people worked Taylor damn near to death and told her to just grin and bear it, even as she was miserable because she gets to live her dream. Children shouldn't need to give up every private part of themselves or their families or every second of their time just because they're one of the lucky ones, which is so sick to call it that, by the way. That is an unreasonable commodification of child labor that we should realize in 2024 is not okay. That shouldn't change just when somebody hits adulthood, though. Humans are humans. They are not and should not be for commodification. It doesn't surprise me how much of a problem they have with predators in Hollywood, because there's already such a widespread normalization of the commodification and sale of children's art, children's joy, children's innocence, women's joy, women's art. People who cite this video of Taylor as evidence against Chappell are also failing to realize Taylor's been very evasive about what we know about her and how we find out about it, and she has been ever since Rep. Taylor wears disguises, travels in suitcases and cleaning carts. We only see her when she wants to be seen, with the people she wants to be seen with. The photos we get of her are often released at a later date by Backgrid or by friends of hers. She's also talked about how many stalkers she has, how many home intruders, how she carries the same medical supplies that medics take into war zones because she's had so many people show up to her home with pew-pews. This belief people have that they have a close relationship with her and know everything is something that has directly endangered her many times. What these critics of Chappell are referencing isn't even something that Taylor actively believes, and more so, it's a belief that exposed her to a tremendous amount of harm. When obsession and fanaticism strike. I also wager there isn't a day in Chappell's life where she doesn't think about Christina Grimmie. She was an amazingly talented artist on the rise whose life was cut short by a mega fan who showed up to the merch table after one of her concerts. She was 22. Though she doesn't get brought up much anymore, I wager the large majority of younger female musicians think about her regularly and how all it takes is one fan's dangerous obsession and your life is over. And very often, not just your life, because pop stars are so very often surrounded by so many people. I would say that as a whole, queer people are more aware of danger, especially that danger coming from intimate relationships. People who pretend to be one of us or even go on dates or sleep with us and then have internalized homophobia and react violently. Chappell has said she misses just being able to go out and be messy, consume things, kiss girls, not have to think about it. Every minute of her life changed in just a matter of weeks. So many people are criticizing Chappell for her boundaries and for having these fears when we are barely weeks out of the Southport incident and Taylor's Vienna concerts being canceled. These boundaries are needed. Both people who claim to love a celebrity and those who claim to despise them are capable of causing tremendous harm. And in many cases, they don't harm the celebrity directly, but rather hurt them through their fans. Sticks, stones, and words can hurt me. I think it's also worth discussing the need for boundaries regarding how we speak to people, both in person and online. For some reason, commenters on the internet believe that if they have an opinion about a piece of content, they need to leave it on that piece of content. Y'all really need to relearn quietly complaining about people in the group chat or something like that, or at least complain about it in your space. You are entitled to have a negative opinion of somebody. You're not entitled to brutalize them with that opinion just because you need attention or dopamine. I think we will one day look at hate commenters and trolls as a significant factor in mental illness. As a culture, I feel like we need a lot more etiquette around speaking online. Like, you're entitled to your opinions and you're entitled to call out people who are harming others, but you're not entitled to dogpiling others just because they made a video that some people felt was cringe. A lot of people don't post online despite desperately wanting to because they don't want to suffer the abuse of commenters. And people who are mentally ill but dependent on their social media income for survival don't have many options to avoid harmful commenters without ceasing posting entirely. And platforms don't do enough to stop these troll accounts. They are increasingly taking a hands-off and AI-automated approach to moderation. We are experiencing significant mental health crises, and a good number of people have the maladaptive coping skill of lashing out at others on the internet to make them feel better about themselves. You shouldn't have to be mentally resilient enough to endure the harm from hate commenters just to share things you love online. Mentally ill people should be able to participate in social media without fear of being triggered. And the more marginalized you are, the more bigotry and abuse you're likely to suffer from commenters. Social media will always be inherently unequal so long as bigotry is allowed to continue unchecked. Marginalized people shouldn't have to suffer emotional harm just to participate in the one form of community that is always available to us. I used to not understand all the etiquette rules of Victorian London, but now I totally get it. As more and more people were coming together, you needed to instill some form of order because the human brain was not designed for all of this stimulation and socialization, all of this communication that we're doing nowadays. I think we need to have renewed pushes that if you wouldn't talk to your grandmother that way in person, you shouldn't be talking to a stranger that way online. Since social media platforms directly benefit from us being toxically engaged, I think only a social movement has potential to change the online culture. Unless we get some laws and legislation around this, the social media companies are not going to change what is keeping them wealthy. The internet is no longer a new frontier or Wild West type thing where only the tough survive. Literally everyone needs to be online right now, which means we need to inject compassion into this space. Chappell and the fuzzy line between public and private. I think one of the interesting things about Chappell blowing up so fast is that she really has opened up a lot of discussions about how public versus private citizen is just seen as a binary state. And the moment you're viewed as a public figure, there's nearly nothing you can do to stop being a public figure without ceasing to work and hiding away from the world. In a world where literally anyone can have a TikTok go viral and go from being a private citizen to a public citizen overnight, it really seems like we need significantly more legal protections to privacy and more delineations of public versus private. Especially when we don't even have to be the ones taking that TikTok. Like, I could just go out tomorrow and somebody could record me doing something stupid in the wild, and that could cause me to get a bunch of hate on the internet, and there's literally nothing that I can do about that. Very often nowadays, a person goes from being a private to a public figure before they have the money to afford things like bodyguards and lawyers to defend themselves with. There's a very fuzzy line over which you become a public figure, but the moment you're across that line, you legally have significantly less rights to privacy. And it used to be that fame almost automatically conveyed money and power and influence, but now there are many levels to fame, and fans as a whole have more access to people. And beyond that, there's a greater craving for authenticity, which flies in defiance of showbiz artifice. Many fans are aware of the facades are fake, and they're just waiting for the moment that they begin to fall. Still, others are aware that facades exist, and in their desperation to establish themselves as the #1 superfan, they endeavor to know every single detail, even the ones that have been carefully concealed. But with that craving for authenticity, we have the Rita Hayward's of the world getting huge overnight, and in the context of a world where that's not only possible, but also happens to people regularly, we need to renegotiate what it means to be famous. In Chappell, it's so good to see a young artist who's not afraid to express boundaries, but I do fear that her career is going to suffer for it. Because for every pop star that has a boundary, there's somebody that's following along behind them that is just going to accept whatever treatment because they're desperate. I do hope that over the next few weeks, we see more artists speaking out in defense of what Chappell is saying, and there becomes a bigger movement of fans respecting artists' space and bodies. Facades, characters, personas, and lies. I think something that Showbiz has struggled with in social media is that Showbiz is centered around facades and characters and personas, whilst the actual artist behind these characters may or may not resemble the brand they're presenting as. The more you see of that person, the more you may realize that they're not who they've always been fronting as. And as more people have to just casually exist online and consider their self as a brand, that's making a lot of people more aware of self-branding and forming a brand identity based on your own identity. More people than ever are discussing the faux persona that they put on for camera openly. Chappell is existing at this sort of flashbang. On the one hand, fans have never had more direct access to celebrity, but on the other hand, celebrities have never had access to more tools to instantly achieve that facade and that artifice. I think of Kylie Jenner wearing masks out in public to conceal her features and then posting a perfectly face-tuned selfie of herself 5 minutes later. And Chappell is in this unique position where she very openly discusses her facade in a way that very many artists don't. She kind of exists in this position of opening a lot of people's eyes to Hollywood. And now that their eyes are open, they're starting to realize just how much artifice is involved in Hollywood. There are a lot of people who believe we are on the verge of seeing more celebrities come out, and I absolutely think a lot of the hatred and criticism that is targeted at Chappell may be targeted that way because they don't want other artists to feel safe coming out. They want us to hide. And it's not just queerness, it's every part of their identity that isn't palatable for mass consumption. A lot of celebrities aren't monogamous. A lot of celebrities don't want to settle down with one person. A lot of artists prioritize their art and their creation over their relationships. And it's not just relationship-related information either. I have to add a section on what's been going on with Taylor Swift in the aftermath of Southport tragedy and Vienna. Taylor Swift. Loose lips swiftly sink ships. There are a wide array of reasons why celebrities remain quiet on any number of issues, but I think one of the biggest is fan safety. The larger an artist's events become, the more chance you'll have a bad actor in the middle of your crowd who will seek to ruin the safe space the artist created. A concert should always be first and foremost a safe place for fans to experience the art that an artist has created. There's been a lot of pressure on Taylor to speak up recently on a wide array of political matters. And I think a lot of fans just don't realize how many people just wait on Taylor to step a toe out of line so they can strike her down. Because of the things she said about Trump last election and her broadly left-leaning sentiments, Fox News was hell-bent on labeling her a threat to America back in January. I think that's probably why so much NFL and hanging out with her NFL pals has been going on, to keep that section of her fan base pacified. People wanted her to speak out about Southport and about Vienna as soon as we got the news, ignoring the fact that one of the points of such terrorist actions is to generate a response. This is not a change in how Taylor operates. Her entire career, she's been absurdly cautious what she says and how she says it while she's on tour. Speaking out immediately after Vienna would have increased the likelihood of someone attempting to cause harm in London. I understand with people having facades and personas that there's this constant push to get ahead or around that, or to find what that person is truly hiding and why they're hiding it, but so often it turns into witch hunts that ostracize and traumatize marginalized and hurting people. There's also a fine line of taking action to inform yourself and protect yourself from betrayal, but it's all too often to cross that line, violating other people's boundaries and their own right to privacy and safety. And this is why I also feel so strongly against mass news media taking content and research that is largely done by marginalized fans and broadcasting it to the world. When fans speculate on celebrities' lives and the meanings and the intent of their art, it's usually through a more benevolent and charitable lens than the exploitative lens news media operates from. Fans are speculating for the purpose of understanding the art and the artist better in reading between the lines. The media just wants to get rich. They want to get clicks. They don't care who suffers. I also hate the way social media increases engagement by deliberately showing people content from people with opposing beliefs. When it comes to fandom and shipping and the type of debates and divisions that occur within communities, it is very common for people to get violently aggressive at others, even when it is a ship from an entirely fictional show and has no bearing on the real world. The amount of threats and doxing and actual, legitimate, real-world physical and psychological harm that comes from putting people with opposed viewpoints together just to keep them on your app a little bit longer is significant and troubling. It's something that, as a whole, needs to change. I've spent a lot of time thinking about the show Loki and how social media throwing fandom into each other's spaces resulted in a lot of real harassment of basically every woman on the show and a lot of fans. Brace yourselves, because if you're not familiar, this is a doozy. In the show Loki, there are a lot of parallel universes, and each one has a Loki variant. The show establishes very early on that just because someone is a Loki variant doesn't mean they are genetically the same. There's a Loki who's black, there's a Loki who's an alligator. Loki is bi, and there are two major love interests presented, a man named Mobius and a woman who is a Loki variant named Sylvie. Some fans wanted him in a relationship with Mobius so bad that they saw the relationship that he was in with Sylvie as self-cessed, which no, that's not a real thing, because it's not possible, because there's not parallel universes in the real world. Fans who are in support of the relationship between Loki and Sylvie are called Silkies. But these fans of Loki being with Mobius were so hell-bent on their problematic faves being together that they openly harassed not even just the Silkies. They were also calling the female director and the writers creators of incest. They also tried to label the director as biphobic, even though bi people still have hetero-passing relationships, and the director herself is openly bi. They were trying to equate this fake self-cessed thing that they invented as being the same as being attracted to your literal sister. And like I said, it is in no way a real thing. And even if it was like a thing, it's probably the biggest waste of time to get offended over, because it is patently impossible in the real world, and thus no one can be legitimately harmed by it. But what people can be legitimately harmed by is teens and young adults who do not get the attention and dopamine they need from their real lives, and who get it by starting pointless fights on the internet. Regardless of what the current attitudes and beliefs of society are, there will always be a significant percentage of LGBTQ people in Hollywood and in the greater majority of people. And until societal issues that encourage them to put on a facade are gone, many will remain in the closet, placing symbols in their art and flagging with their fashion in an attempt to stay in community with the rest of us. And unfortunately, there are no simple solutions to these problems. A lot of them are caused by inflammatory algorithms and inflammatory politicians, both of whom have realized they can get away with a lot if people are given a scapegoat. Until something prevents politicians and companies from deliberately utilizing outrage to keep people in their spaces engaged in their rhetoric, we're going to have people whose toxic and harmful opinions are directly related to their lack of contact with the real world. I mentioned earlier that I do think a social etiquette movement probably has more chance of succeeding than any changes on these platforms, considering how much money and influence the billionaires who own them have. It doesn't help that for a while, one of the best ways to grow on short-form media sites was to make clapbacks to comments. All in all, we would be much better if we just blocked people who argue for dopamine and moved on with our day. But when clapping back gets you growth, it promotes this belief that everyone should clap back. But the internet is not going away. Social media is not going away. It is a part of our lives, and it needs to be one that we treat like the rest of the world. I do think one thing that we need to be demanding every platform do better is allowing people to create spaces where marginalized groups can discuss things that aren't also ending up on the greater For You page of people who think oppositely. But also, those people should be able to discuss those topics without suffering, censoring, or shadow banning. I think as social communication platforms, social media owes it to marginalized groups to allow them to easily find other people they're in community with. And once they're in that community, to create content amongst themselves without fear that it's going to a wider unrelated audience, because very often in social media, you either have to already know the people you want to communicate with and to communicate with those people directly, or if you want to find other people who share your beliefs, you very often just have to throw content in the world and hope it doesn't end up on the wrong side. How many times has a marginalized person complained about their video ending up on the wrong side of TikTok? One of the biggest reasons queer analysis of media struggles is because our content is constantly ending up being used by an algorithm to generate rage to keep people engaged on their sites. One of the things that I hate seeing the most is the belief that it's just online stuff. It's not hurting anybody, but that just shows a tremendous lack of understanding of the immense psychological pressures and the physical and mental harm those pressures can cause. When the internet is necessary for life and social media is a survival skill, everyone has to wade through toxic sludge as a part of modern survival, and it's poisoning us. I truly believe the only recourse and the only solution is compassion, and also taking aggressive control over the types of people that have access to you. If there is only one takeaway that I want everyone from this video to have, it's to protect your peace. Block all the haters. And more broadly, it makes it harder for marginalized people to make content where they do interpretations through their personal lens to be able to get their viewpoint and opinions into the world, and to meet other people who feel the same way, because they have to be prepared to suffer the violence of bigots who think otherwise. Sorry if this seemed a little unfocused or info-dumpy at parts. I basically took 3 videos and then I combined them together, and then I realized that there was a lot of context that if I didn't add it, I was just going to have people who were saying the same 3 dumb things in the comments, so I wanted to address all of those statements regarding PR and things like that. And I also just think that this is a great place for me to stash those opinions so that I can refer back to them when commenters in the future are like, blah! Anyway, I'm still a very small channel at time of creation. I am at less than 2,000 subscribers. I'm desperately trying to get to that 2K mark, so if you don't mind subscribing, that'd be great. Also, please check out my other videos. If you've watched over an hour of me talking, I'm sure that I have other content that you'll like. Taylor Swift, loose lips, simply swift. Taylor Swift, loose lips, swiftly swift. Loose lips swiftly sink ships. 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 Oh my god, that's impossible to say. Why did I write this? I've been keeping my eyes peeled for everything that is a part of this Sapphic summer, and it is so inspiring to see so many women killing me. Wait. I started writing a script for what I thought was a 2-minute TikTok, and I ended up with this video, however long it is. If you've watched this far, you must like something, so all of your likes, comments, and subscriptions really do help me out a lot. Especially because I have a feeling this is going to be an unpopular one. But whatever. Everything I said is true. They can bite me if they don't like it.